We will proceed to a step further in learning from statistics by breaking the abstract into parts, and we learn from that for the purpose of planning statistical analysis plan. So here I just obscure the details of the example abstract, so that you can see clearly about the header or the structure abstract that with that 4 sections. And then we put and see the details of the conclusions that a good abstract need to have a conclusions that started with the main conclusions that answering the primary research question. Some may have a supportive or some details of the main findings, so that it lead to the third one, the recommendations or the suggestion of a new research questions. So usually it take about 1 to 3 sentences in this part. In the results section, there are 4 main parts. First is about a study sample, from a total of n, whatever n, the sample size. On average, how old they are, their characteristics, so that the readers will know how the sample look like to get the answer like that. Can they apply the findings to their own population, for example? So it's really need this. Then usually followed by the introductory findings, where we present the baseline finding, or in some research about identify the risk factors. The bivariate analysis to walk the audience to the main multivariable analysis is here. Then the third one is the main findings that answer the primary outcome or the primary research question. So I put it here, must provide this one, p-value is optional, but not the p-value, solely p-value. It's really highly misleading. Don't do that. And if needed, supportive findings to make the main findings stand out, usually the components of results like this. So it's just like we have a lot details in results report, in the full study reports, but we just select some to the abstract. Just like we have flowers, plenty of flowers in the gardens, but we need to select just some beautiful one to put in the vase, make it very attractive, attractive and informative. Then for the method section, we provide details from what methods that these results obtain, So we need to start with the type of study design, followed by the sample size and sample selections or sample allocations, depending on the design. Then this is very essential, the primary outcome and the outcome measurements, to make it clear that this determine the sample size calculation, determine statistical analysis method, and it's brings to the main findings that used for that conclusions. All the red components here is essential and need to be very logically presented. That means details here should be sufficient to be able to not only allow replicability as the property of science, but also justify this thing, the main findings and the conclusions. For the background, as you can see, the problem statement, the current knowledge, and the gap of the knowledge. So, write your own abstract now, and then you will have your first abstract if you are new. That's look like a professional one. If you have a complete component like this. In statistics, this components is about data presentation, results. The interpretations is here in the conclusion. And in the method sections, is about sample size calculation. We will cover in another lecture. It takes about 1 semester long in a usual class for statistician. About data management, the measurements, the statistical descriptions about how we handle the data, how we analyze it, and what method using for that analysis. So all these are statistical components. Now, when we are involving in our academic life or even common life, we need to read a paper, or somebody become a researcher. So there are two roles for us. Unavoidable to be the reader, the audience, consumer of the research. But some a researcher who produce research. As the one who consume a research, once we understand about the components of the abstracts, that is the first one that we are looking at when we search the literature, is the abstract. So if we know that concept, we will start here, the conclusion. If it adds something, you will proceed. If it's have an effect, in the implications in solving the problem, in changing the practice, formulating the policy, add something to the society, or beneficial for your purpose, it will be the evidence that you will use further in your practice, or evidence-based practice. You will then continue to the next section. If not, you will continue to the next paper. So this is once you read, start here. If it's interesting, then you judge if these conclusions is valid, is reasonable. Just like the vaccine trial, if it is concluded based on the p-value, it will be significantly, because p is less than 0.05, but not that one, because we look at the effect and consider if it's large enough to support that conclusions. Otherwise it will be overclaim. Need to tone down the conclusions sense. That means you need to believe what has been stated by the researcher, but use your own judgment that the effect is large enough to justify that conclusions. Now, after that, if it's okay, you will then proceed to the next step. That is the magnitude of effect correct or not? Is it could be wrong due to these things that the data wrong? By looking at details of data collections, data management, or wrong due to the analytical methods. You need to judge based on the type of variable and how they select the method of an analysis appropriate or not. Or it could be wrong due to the bias. In details of the method sections, that what biases could distort the findings to make the magnitude of effect being underestimate or overestimate the truth that should be. So here is a very important step in reading a paper. We call it critical appraisal, the paper. Now, if you are a researcher, you plan to do something that ends up with a very good conclusion, you need then to provide enough details that allow replicability. This is the property of science, not magic, because there are details for the average people. If they want to replicate the way the study is conducted, and it should end up with the same conclusion, that's allow being replicable. And also facilitate judgment on the validity of the study results. For example, if you don't put details about primary outcome and its measurements, there's no way to judge about how validity the results is. So provide enough details. Always provide the main magnitude of effect in the results sections with this format. And finally, make a statement of conclusion precise and clear, being a good take-home message for the audience. So to be fair, it needs to be interpreted based on the magnitude of effect, not the opinion. If possible, it should be new. It will be wonderful if it is a breakthrough study. So plan to have this by knowing or understanding about the components of abstracts, and then how to get similar like this structure and plan for it, both methodologically and statistically. We will proceed to statistical analysis plan development for our research in the next section.